Ladies and gentlemen, you already know who they are. The moment I said, toxic people, someone popped into your head. Maybe it's a coworker who always undermines you. Maybe it's a family member who manipulates you with guilt. Or that friend who only calls when they need something. Let's stop pretending we don't see it. And let's stop thinking that being a good person means putting up with bad behavior. The smartest way to deal with toxic people. It's not complicated. But it does require one thing: a decision. You decide that your peace is more important than their chaos. You decide that your boundaries matter more than their opinions. You decide that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. Because toxic people don't just drain your energy, they train you to question your worth. You start second, guessing yourself. You shrink to make them comfortable. You stay quiet to avoid their drama. And little by little, you disappear from your own life. That ends today. You don't need to yell. You don't need to fight. You don't even need to explain. You need a boundary. You need a line. You need a rule that says, I don't accept that behavior in my life. And when you draw that line, they might get louder. They might guilt trip you. They might call you selfish. Let them. Let them scream while you walk away with your peace intact. You are not responsible for fixing broken people who don't want to heal. You are not required to sacrifice your well-being to keep someone else from facing their own reflection. That's not loyalty. That's self-abandonment. Here's the truth. Not everyone deserves a front row seat in your life. Some people belong in the balcony, and some people, they don't belong in the building at all. The smartest way to deal with toxic people isn't to change them. It's to change how much access they have to you. Protect your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. When you think about the stress and emotional exhaustion that comes from dealing with toxic people, it's easy to believe the solution is complicated. That you need the perfect words, the right moment, or some advanced strategy to fix things. But the smartest way to protect yourself starts with one simple shift: choose your peace over their chaos. You don't need to wait for them to change. You don't need to explain your feelings again and again, hoping they'll finally get it. And you definitely don't need to keep playing the same emotional tug of war, hoping for a different outcome. That's how you stay trapped in their storm. The truth is, toxic people thrive in confusion. They love when you question yourself. They feed off your guilt, your hesitation, your need to be liked. They twist your kindness into weakness, and before you know it, you're walking on eggshells in your own life, monitoring your tone, rehearsing your responses, trying not to set them off. That's not peace. That's survival. Choosing peace means choosing clarity. It means stepping back far enough to see the pattern instead of just reacting to the latest problem. It means saying, I don't need to understand why they act this way to know it's not okay. Because a toxic person's behavior doesn't need to be justified in order for you to set a boundary. Their pain isn't an excuse to cause yours. The hardest part is that peace doesn't always feel peaceful at first. Sometimes it feels like guilt. Sometimes it feels like loss. When you're used to over-explaining, people-pleasing, or rescuing others, peace can feel selfish. But that's the old pattern talking. That's not truth. Peace looks like not answering the call when you know they're going to drain you. It looks like saying no without a long excuse. It looks like staying grounded when they try to stir up emotion in you. Peace is not passive. It's a decision you actively make over and over. Every time you choose not to engage in their chaos, you are choosing yourself. It's not about pretending they don't exist. It's about refusing to let them pull you out of alignment. You can be polite without being available. You can be compassionate without being accessible. You can love someone and still limit your exposure to their dysfunction. That's not cold. That's healthy. We're trained to believe that saying no is harsh. That silence is rude. That taking space is betrayal. But when someone repeatedly brings negativity, manipulation, or emotional volatility into your life, your silence is self-protection. Your space is sanity. Your no is not rejection, it's a boundary. The people who truly care about you will respect your limits. The ones who benefit from crossing them will try to make you feel bad for drawing the line. And that's how you know the difference. Someone who values your well-being won't guilt you for protecting it. Every time you prioritize your peace, you reinforce your self-worth. You remind yourself that your emotional state matters, that you don't have to participate in every argument you're invited to, that not everything requires your attention, your energy, or your reaction. That's how you take your power back. There's nothing dramatic about walking away from drama. There's nothing wrong with disengaging from dysfunction. If someone's presence consistently leaves you feeling small, tense, anxious, or unsure of yourself, that's not a relationship, that's a pattern of harm. You don't need permission to exit that cycle. You don't need to announce it. You don't need closure. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is quietly reclaim your space and get back to living a life where peace is your default, not your reward for surviving chaos. Choosing peace doesn't mean life gets quieter overnight, but it does mean you get quieter inside, clearer, stronger. It means you're not living in reaction to someone else's damage anymore. You're choosing what you allow in your world. You're choosing peace, and there's nothing smarter than that. A lot of people confuse being kind with being endlessly tolerant. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that being a good person means keeping the peace, smoothing things over, and always giving others the benefit of the doubt, especially when they treat us badly. That belief is dangerous, because when kindness gets twisted into silence, when empathy turns into enabling, when your compassion becomes a doorway for someone else's dysfunction to walk in and settle down, you're not practicing kindness. You're practicing self-abandonment. Toxic people are masterful at using your good heart against you. They rely on your fear of conflict. They know you want to be seen as fair, patient, and forgiving. And they exploit that. They push your boundaries, then act like you're the problem when you finally react. They say things like, "I thought you were more mature," or "You're being dramatic," or "You're supposed to be the bigger person." And in trying to live up to those labels, you shrink. You tolerate. You absorb more than you should. But let's get something straight. Being kind does not mean you have to stay quiet when someone disrespects you. It doesn't mean you allow repeated harm because you understand their pain. It doesn't mean you keep giving people the chance to step on you just because you hope they'll learn to walk differently. That's not kindness. That's fear dressed up as virtue. Kindness, real kindness, is rooted in truth. And the truth is, some behavior is unacceptable, no matter where it comes from. No matter how hurt someone else is. No matter how many good memories you have with them. No matter how much you wish they were different. You can still care about someone and decide that their behavior is no longer welcome in your life. This is especially hard when the toxic person is someone close to you. A family member, a partner, a friend you've known forever. You tell yourself, they don't mean it, or they're going through something, or maybe if I just say it a different way, they'll get it. But how many times have you had that same conversation? How many nights have you stayed up replaying what you said, wondering if you should have said less, or more, or nothing at all? At some point, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is stop negotiating your value. Stop hoping that your silence will be taken as strength. Stop confusing endurance with love. Because staying in toxic environments doesn't heal the other person. It slowly destroys you. And here's the part people don't like to talk about. Some of the most toxic relationships are built on niceness. Polite conversations with poison underneath. Smiles that hide manipulation. Obligations dressed up as loyalty. So when you finally speak up, or step away, or say no, you're treated like the villain. Because in their story, your tolerance was the agreement. Your silence was the contract. And when you break it, you break the illusion. But that's not your burden to carry anymore. There's this myth that boundaries are rude, that saying no is harsh, that protecting your peace is selfish. Let's be clear, boundaries are kindness in action. Not just for you, but for everyone. Because when you stop pretending everything is okay, when you stop tolerating disrespect, You give the relationship a chance to be real, or you give yourself the space to heal. You don't need to yell. You don't need to get revenge. You don't need to prove you're right. You just need to stop believing that love requires pain or that being good means being silent. You are allowed to expect respect. You are allowed to ask for accountability. You are allowed to walk away from anyone who cannot give you those things. So, no, kindness doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. It doesn't mean you keep giving when you're depleted. It doesn't mean you let someone else's chaos run your life. Real kindness starts with how you treat yourself, and that includes not standing in the fire just to prove you can handle the heat. You don't always see it happening at first. Toxicity doesn't usually walk in waving a red flag. It sneaks in quietly, through sarcasm masked as humor, backhanded compliments, subtle put-downs, constant interruptions, or the way they always shift the blame onto you when things go wrong. And the longer you're around it, the more you begin to question yourself. That's how it starts. Tiny cracks in your confidence. At first, you second-guess your reaction. Maybe I overreacted. Then you second-guess your memory. Maybe it didn't happen the way I thought. Eventually, you start second-guessing your worth. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I really am the problem. That's not self-awareness, it's erosion. And that erosion, over time, changes how you see yourself and what you believe you deserve. Toxic people are often skilled at twisting your strength into something ugly. Your empathy becomes a weakness. Your vulnerability becomes ammunition. Your willingness to forgive becomes permission for them to do it again. And because they're rarely outright abusive, at least not at first, you keep hoping it'll get better. You keep making excuses. You keep shrinking yourself just a little more, thinking that if you're easier, quieter, more agreeable, things will smooth out. But that's how self-worth disappears. One compromise at a time, you lower the bar. You tolerate the tone. You absorb the blame. And before long, the version of you who once stood tall, spoke up, believed in themselves, that version gets buried under the weight of constant emotional maintenance. The scariest part isn't the toxic person's behavior. It's how you start behaving in response. You stop sharing your thoughts because they'll just twist your words. You stop asking for what you need because it always turns into a fight. You stop being fully yourself because it feels safer to play small. That's not love. That's self-erasure. The more you try to keep the peace, the more you sacrifice your voice. The more you try to protect the relationship, the more you damage your sense of identity. You start adjusting yourself to meet their moods. You walk on eggshells. You rehearse your words before you speak. You spend more time managing their emotions than living your own life. And here's what you need to know. This doesn't just affect your relationship with that one toxic person. It ripples into every area of your life. You start second-guessing your worth at work. You doubt yourself in friendships. You become less likely to take risks, speak up, or chase what excites you, because you've internalized the belief that your voice doesn't matter, that you're too much to handle. That's what toxic relationships do. They don't just drain your energy in the moment. They train your brain to expect criticism, chaos, and rejection as normal. And over time, they change your baseline. What should be unacceptable starts to feel familiar. And what should feel natural, confidence, joy, clarity, feels foreign. But here's the good news. The moment you recognize the pattern is the moment you can begin to break it. The moment you realize that the problem isn't your sensitivity, but their insensitivity, not your standards, but their refusal to meet them. You begin to reclaim your power. You were not put here to shrink for someone else's comfort. You were not made to question your every move, just to avoid someone else's temper. And you definitely weren't meant to spend your life proving your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. The smartest thing you can do when your self-worth is being eroded is to step back. Get quiet. Listen to the version of you that existed before the gaslighting, before the guilt, before you started doubting your intuition. That voice is still there. It's just been drowned out. Toxic people will convince you that you need them to feel okay. That without them, you'll be alone, or lost or unloved. But that's a lie designed to keep you tethered. The truth is, the moment you begin to value your peace over their presence, you begin to rebuild. Your self-worth isn't gone. It's just been buried under years of noise. You can dig it out. You can come back to yourself. And when you do, you'll wonder why you ever let anyone make you feel small in the first place. One of the most exhausting parts of dealing with toxic people is the constant pressure to explain yourself. Every decision, every boundary, every feeling, you end up justifying it like you're on trial. And the truth is, you're not. You don't need to provide a detailed report every time you choose what's best for you. Toxic people thrive on your need to be understood. They use it as a tool to keep you in the loop, to pull you back in, to manipulate the situation until you doubt your own reasoning. And because you care, because you're thoughtful and emotionally aware, you keep showing up to explain. You write the long text. You go back into the conversation. You hope that if you just say it the right way, they'll get it this time. But they won't. Because it's not about understanding. It's about control. When someone truly respects you, they don't require endless explanations. They honor your choices, even when they don't fully agree with them. But toxic people make you feel like setting a boundary is a betrayal, like saying no is a personal attack, like needing space is a selfish act. So you overcompensate, you soften your words. You give disclaimers. You stay longer than you want to, not because you're unsure, but because you're afraid of how they'll react. That fear of reaction is how they win. They turn your decision into a debate. Suddenly, it's not about how you feel. It's about defending your right to feel it. And once you're on that hamster wheel, it's hard to get off. You start questioning yourself. You think maybe you were too harsh. Maybe you should have given one more chance. Maybe you owe them another conversation. But you don't. You don't owe anyone access to you just because they demand it. You don't have to soften your truth just to make someone else comfortable. You don't need to rehearse your reasons like a script, hoping for approval. Boundaries are not negotiations. They are decisions. And they don't require anyone else's permission to be valid. It's uncomfortable at first, especially if you've spent your life being the peacemaker, the one who keeps it together, the one who doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Silence feels harsh. Saying, "I'm not available for this conversation," feels cold. But here's the reality. Silence is powerful. Silence is a decision. Silence says, "I've said what I needed to say, and I'm not repeating myself." Toxic people hate silence. They hate when you don't react, when you stop feeding the drama, when you don't answer the call, when you don't defend yourself, because their power is in your reaction. And when you remove that, they're left alone with their own behavior. And that's something they don't want to face. Sometimes the smartest and strongest move you can make is to simply disengage. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. A calm, clear, "This no longer works for me," followed by distance. Not because you're better than them, not because you hate them, but because you've finally realized your peace is not up for debate. You can love someone and still step away. You can care and still choose space. You can wish someone healing without allowing their chaos into your life. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. It takes courage to stop explaining and start living according to what you know is right for you. Let them think what they want. Let them call you selfish. Let them twist the story. That says more about them than it ever will about you. Your job isn't to manage their perception. It's to manage your energy. And if someone constantly puts you in a position where you have to defend your boundaries, they were never really interested in respecting them to begin with. The sooner you realize you don't need their understanding to move on, the freer you become. You get your time back. You get your clarity back. And most importantly, you get yourself back. Because explaining yourself to someone who's committed to misunderstanding you is the slowest form of self-abandonment. You don't need to yell. You don't need to prove your pain. You don't need a perfectly worded exit. You just need to decide that your well-being is no longer up for discussion. That's when everything changes. One of the biggest emotional traps you can fall into with toxic people is believing it's your responsibility to fix them. Especially if you're someone who feels deeply, who cares easily, who sees potential in people. You notice their wounds, their patterns, their trauma, and you think, if I just love them enough, support them enough, stay patient long enough, maybe they'll finally heal. That belief is powerful, and it's also dangerous. Because here's what happens. You start pouring yourself into someone who doesn't want to change. You twist yourself in emotional knots trying to say the right thing, show up the right way, create a safe space, all while their behavior keeps hurting you. You justify it by saying they've been through so much. You make excuses like, they don't mean it, or they just don't know how to love properly. And you convince yourself that if you just hang on, if you just keep showing them what healthy love looks like, they'll eventually transform. But that's not love. That's a rescue mission. And it's not your job. You are not their therapist. You are not their emotional rehab center. You are not the person who was put on this earth to carry someone else's healing on your back. Healing is a personal decision. And if they haven't chosen it for themselves, no amount of effort from you will make it happen. Toxic people often use their pain as a shield. They deflect accountability with stories of their past, using it to justify present-day harm. They want you to feel guilty for asking for more. They want you to feel selfish for needing respect. And when you finally speak up or try to walk away, they flip the script and make you the villain for not helping them heal. But healing isn't something you can do for someone. It's something they have to do for themselves. And if they refuse to take responsibility for their own growth, it doesn't matter how many times you forgive them, explain things, or stick around hoping for a change. You cannot out-love someone's refusal to evolve. The longer you stay in that role, the fixer, the forgiver, the emotional sponge, the more drained you become. And slowly, you lose parts of yourself, your energy, your clarity, your joy. Because every time you put their healing ahead of your own well-being, you're sending yourself the message that their potential is more important than your peace. It's not. You can have empathy without overextending. You can recognize someone's pain without allowing it to become your burden. You can see their wounds and still walk away when those wounds are causing you harm. That's not betrayal. That's self-respect. A lot of people mistake loyalty for love. They stay because they feel responsible. They don't want to abandon someone who's struggling. But here's the truth: staying in a toxic dynamic doesn't help the other person grow. In fact, it often delays their growth. Why would they change if there are no real consequences? Why would they take accountability if someone else keeps absorbing the fallout? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to let go, to step back, to stop rescuing. Because without your constant emotional labor propping them up, they're forced to confront themselves. And you're finally free to reclaim your energy and redirect it toward your own healing. You are allowed to walk away from someone who is hurting you, even if they're hurting too. You are allowed to protect yourself, even when someone else is in pain. Compassion doesn't mean self-sacrifice. And love doesn't mean losing yourself in the process of trying to save someone else. You can wish them well from a distance. You can hope they find healing without being the one to carry them there. And you can choose yourself, not because you don't care, but because you finally realize that caring for someone doesn't mean destroying yourself for their comfort. You are not their healer. You never were. And the sooner you release that responsibility, the sooner you begin to heal yourself. Peace isn't just a nice idea, it's survival. In a world that constantly demands your attention, your energy, your reaction, protecting your peace isn't a luxury. It's your lifeline. And when you're dealing with toxic people, it's not just important, it's non-negotiable. Toxic people are chaos in disguise. Their presence often comes wrapped in charm, familiarity, or emotional history. But underneath it all, they operate like a storm. One moment they're calm, the next they're throwing subtle jabs, twisting your words, starting fires, and then blaming you for the smoke. If you're not vigilant, you'll start living in response to them. Every message, every conversation, every mood swing becomes a new source of anxiety. And slowly, your nervous system forgets what calm even feels like. That's why you need to protect your peace like it's sacred. Because it is. It's the space where your clarity lives. It's where your confidence returns. It's where your true voice can speak without fear. And the hard truth is, not everyone deserves access to it. Some people have shown you, through their behavior, their choices, their patterns, that they are not safe for your spirit. And it's not your job to keep letting them in just because they mean well, or because you have history, or because cutting them off feels extreme. What's extreme is how far you've bent yourself to keep them comfortable. What's extreme is the emotional exhaustion you carry after every interaction. What's extreme is how often you lose sleep replaying conversations, trying to make sense of their unpredictable behavior. That's not love. That's not loyalty. That's emotional survival mode. And you deserve so much more than that. You are allowed to choose peace over proximity. You are allowed to turn off your phone, stop responding, unfollow, unfriend, block, or whatever you need to do to preserve your energy. That doesn't make you cold. That makes you clear. You're not being dramatic. You're being intentional. We've been taught to associate strength with endurance, especially in relationships. Stick it out. Be the bigger person. Keep trying. But real strength is knowing when to step away. Real power is choosing not to engage. Real healing is no longer needing to prove anything to people who benefit from keeping you off balance. And let's be honest, some people don't want peace. They want power. They want to pull you into the same drama over and over again, not because they don't know better, but because it works. Because you respond. Because you get flustered. Because you try to fix them, fix yourself. But not this time. This time you choose differently. This time you prioritize your mental clarity. You choose boundaries without guilt. You choose time alone over company that drains you. You let silence do the talking. You allow people to misunderstand you, mislabel you, even resent you, because you finally understand that peace isn't found in being liked by everyone. Peace is found in liking yourself enough to walk away from what disturbs your soul. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming selective. Your energy is your currency, and you don't have to keep spending it on emotional debt that never gets paid back. You don't have to keep opening the door for people who only bring noise into your life. Every time you protect your peace, you teach your nervous system safety. You teach your mind stillness. You remind your heart that it doesn't have to be on guard all the time. And that's when you truly begin to heal. Not just from the toxic person, but from the version of you that thought you had to tolerate it. Protecting your peace doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to stop letting chaos win. It means you understand that your well-being is not up for negotiation. And it means that moving forward, anyone who wants access to you has to bring respect, accountability, and emotional maturity to the table, because that's the new standard. And here's the most powerful part. Once you taste peace, real peace, you won't trade it for anything. Not history, not guilt, not potential, not someone else's approval. You'll know what it took to get here, and you'll defend it with everything you've got.